Well, hello and welcome to our webinar featuring the topic of I graduate, what next? And as we begin this webinar, just want to kind of place a focus on the idea that, over the course of the last few weeks, we've actually shifted from more, content-driven information to focusing on things like the capstone. And now we want to move to, as we approach the end of the term, and some might be approaching the end of their course in their academic program. And if you are, congratulations. And it's time to start thinking about what next. You finished your program, you finished the degree, and now you have it. What do I do next? And the other nice thing about this idea and looking in some of the resources we're going to share, just as we talked about with the capstone, for example, it's never too early to think about what you might do next because opportunities are things that can arise when you don't even know it and don't expect it. So it's one of those things that you should always really have your mind kind of playing towards where are you going to go next when you finish your program. So that's what we're going to look at tonight. And we actually have two objectives, very simple. What now and moving forward. And to join us tonight, we have Dr. Rob Denning, who's the history lead faculty.
Hello, everybody.
And Dr. Denning will be speaking tonight as well, just focusing again on some of the different ways to move forward. And we'll be sharing, our personal experiences and also just a few resources for you to consider as you move forward. So if you're approaching graduation, first, I just want to say congratulations, you made it. Job well done, and your work has paid off for you as you've written many papers and completed your capstone, and that is just a wonderful feeling, and you've accomplished something great. So definitely congratulations on that. And now the question begs, do you have an idea of what you would like to do next? And the important thing to keep in mind when we talk about that is some people enter graduate school, planning to stay in their current position. The graduate degree might open new opportunities for them within their current workplace, and if that's the case, wonderful. Others, maybe the more traditional student, for example, that went from their bachelor's program into their master's program is now starting to think about what do I do? Do I need to go that next step for the PhD? And we'll talk about that here shortly. Or maybe you're going to look for some work experience, and that's what we're going to focus on. The link on your screen, have you considered your options? There's a really nice article from the Washington Post that really just talks about some of the different options that you can consider following your master's program, looking at whether or not a PhD is right for you, and just how you might be able to take those next steps as you start to, again, move outside the academic realm in terms of working on your degree now into the workforce. And one of the things you do want to also consider is asking your instructors about their background. One of the things about your instructors, present company included between myself and Dr. Denny, is the fact that we all do have different backgrounds and not all of them are traditional. And by that I mean it doesn't necessarily mean one degree after another, then moving into teaching or into public history. There's multiple ways to get there and get experience. And there is not a cookie cutter option that exists, and your instructors can share that with you. So I would always encourage you to ask your instructors what their background is because they are more than happy to share that with you as well. And the other thing we want to keep in mind when we talk about what next as it relates to the historian is there are multiple ways in which you can move forward. Research, analysis, interpretation, book reviews, public history, academic history, whatever the case may be. The important thing to remember is none of these things listed on your screen are going to happen the day after you graduate. None of these things might not happen the first couple years after you graduate, and that's okay because there has to be a point in time as you are establishing yourself within the field, you're developing your credentials within the career focus and moving forward and getting that experience. And that's what we're going to focus on as it relates to what you can do now to get to the point that you can start to focus on some of these other ideas and what they may look like as it relates to the historian's function. And there's multiple ways that we can talk about how the historian functions. Professional development, presenting, publishing, conference participation. And this is only a list of 4 items. This list could go on and on because when we talk about the role of the historian, as you know from your coursework, it's varied, it's lengthy, and it is something that differs from person to person and from project to project. And that's very important to keep in mind as you think about what the historian does and then ultimately how the historian functions. Dr. Denning, do you have anything to add to that? Just that initial focus upon what to do right after graduation before we move into some of the career options and things like that?
I would like to reiterate the idea that you should contact your instructors to find out what their career path was like. Because we tend to look at the career of an instructor as something that was predetermined or set in stone. When an instructor kind of rattles off his or her professional experience, it tends to sound like there was a planned path where I got my BA and then my MA and then maybe a PhD, and then I worked here as an instructor and then I worked over here as an instructor. It tends to make it sound that like there's a clear path that the instructor followed, and if you check off the boxes, the right things will happen. When in reality, we all have very different experiences. We all get to our degrees in different ways. Some people, I mean, you get different degrees at different places. We have different focuses. And then once we get out in the workforce, we have different ways of getting to where we are now. It's kind of when you ask someone that's working, at SNHU, there's a lot of people working at SNHU, and so it may seem like there's one path to become an instructor at SNHU. But one of the things that you'll learn when you talk to your instructors is that they all take very different paths. And a lot of our paths are not planned out in advance. Some of them are just happenstance, some of them are just random. You happen to meet the right person, you happen to talk to the right person, and cultivate a networking relationship that pays off years later. Sometimes it follows the standardized path that we all think of, but oftentimes it's just kind of there's just chance involved, and that's difficult to plan for. But there are ways that you can kind of mitigate the randomness or the chance of it by doing some of the things that we're going to talk about here tonight. As for the historian's functions, yes, this is exactly what historians do. Historians do it in different ways. Public historians do things like analysis and interpretation and research and presenting information to the public. It looks different than an academic historian's does, but we're all doing the same things. We're all reading books. We're all analyzing sources. We're all creating organized ways to present that information to the public. Where we present that information will vary from person to person. It could be in conferences or publishing or presenting or doing a lecture or something, but we're all doing the same things. It just takes a different form. And so you the advice that we're going to be talking about tonight is how do you get to the stage where you can do this type of stuff and perform these roles of the historian. So we've got lots to talk about here.
All right. One of the first things you might be thinking about is now I got my master's degree. Do I need another degree? Do I need to go to the PhD? Good question. Everybody's different, like we've mentioned. And one of the things you first want to do is know all of your options. Question that you have to answer. There's two of them. What will you benefit the most in the long run on a personal and professional level? And number two, what are your long term goals? Those questions have to be answered by you. And then you ultimately want to ask questions as well. Just because you have a master's degree does not mean that next step for you personally is to go to the PhD. And I'm going to throw this to Dr. Denning because he has a great story about the PhD process and how to make that determination of whether or not it is for you.
Well, here we get to, I mean, we even have variation here in this meeting. I have the PhD. Professor Klein has master's degrees. We both made the decision, do we want to pursue a higher level of degree? And we arrived at different conclusions, but we have both been successful at it. And so that right there can indicate that that it's not an all or nothing thing. There's no sure thing either way, but you can be successful regardless of which direction you take. And this is where it's going to take a little bit of knowledge about the industry you want to go into. If you want to go into teaching, generally you need to have a master's degree if you want to teach for community colleges. Usually you need to have a PhD if you want to teach at the university level, but that's not always the case. Sometimes PhDs are working at community colleges. Sometimes master's degree students are working in universities. It's not an absolute rule. It's just kind of a generality. But that's the kind of thing that you should know when you are considering your options here. And that's one of the things that you can learn from your instructors. Instructors know this stuff because they've been dealing with it their entire life. And so we all arrive here from different places, as I mentioned before. My decision to go for a PhD was there was no real decision to go for a PhD. I got my BA and my MA in history, and I thought it was interesting. A friend of mine went on to become a PhD. I had never actually considered getting a PhD, but he went and got a PhD and sent me an email one day saying, "Hey, this is really cool. You should try it out." And so, just kind of on a whim, I started applying for PhD programs, and luckily I got in. And then I realized it's a whole lot of work, and I managed to, stick with it and graduate and all of that. It's kind of, but I kind of stumbled into it. I know other people that had intended to go into a PhD program their entire lives. And I know other people who never wanted to get a PhD. They wanted to stop at the master's level. And people from all of those different backgrounds can find success. It's just going to be different types of success. Academic historians generally, you need to get the PhD. But as we all know, academic historians are becoming kind of rather few in number. Most universities are not hiring tenure track professors anymore. They're generally replacing full-time instructors or professors with part-time adjunct instructors as a cost-saving measure. And so there are very few full-time professorships in history anymore. And so the old idea that you have to have a PhD in order to get one of those tenured professor jobs, that's kind of gone out the window. And so it's a whole new world now, and that new world is not dictated by the level of degree like it was in the past. Now we've got different specialties, different fields, different options for historians, and different degrees can help you in different ways. And so you want to get to know the industry you want to go into. If you want to go into teaching, well, then you may want to go for a PhD, depending on what level you're looking at. If you want to teach at a community college level, then there's no reason to get a PhD unless you're personally interested in it. So that's the kind of thing that you can learn from your instructors and from reading, trade magazines from professional historical organizations, which we're going to talk about in here later, I believe. So there are places you can go to find that information out, and you should find out all of your options before you decide if you want to go for a degree, because going for a PhD is a very big decision. I didn't recognize how big of a decision it was when I made that decision. It's a long time. It's generally somewhere in the order of 6 to 9 years of work. You come out of it with a dissertation, which is generally 300-ish pages of writing. It's a very, laborious and intensive program. You live that degree for that 6 to 9 years. It's not a part-time thing. Most universities won't let you do a part-time PhD program. It's all or nothing. And it's a huge commitment. And when you come out of it, again, there's no longer the guarantee that you're going to get a tenure track job anymore. And so you really need to go into it with your eyes open, knowing what the industry is going to look like once you come out the other side.
That focus on change is so crucial when you think about, the way things were when we look at that traditional trajectory, for example, of higher education and whether or not you should go towards the PhD after the master's degree and things like that. And it just represents how things are changing. And all of that has to be played into your overall decision making process. So thank you for placing a focus on that, because it's very, very important to keep in mind when we think about what should I do next. One of the options you have at your fingertips, and they are always ready and willing to help you, is the SNHU Career Center. There is a link to the Career Center from the MySNU website, and you can go there and you'll see this page here, and it has their contact information. This is actually a screenshot from the particular page on the SNU website, and different options that they have to contact them. You know, job fairs that they might have posted, different things like that. But definitely a resource that can assist you in things like resume review, cover letter review. You can talk to a counselor, a career counselor, to focus on, just different discussions regarding to what should I do, what are some options I have, and they can give you, really a nice unbiased opinion regarding, what you could do with your degree as it relates to focusing on different career paths that are already available to you. One of the important things to remember is when you get a graduate degree, it represents higher level critical thinking. And that is something that can also come into play as well as it relates to your overall goals. And you can see their contact information by phone and email. And then there's also a YouTube video that you can watch that provides an overview of their service. It's an interview with a career counselor. So, just another resource for you to take a look at as it relates to some of the services in which they offer. Are you
If I
considering a teaching? Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in for a sec there. The Career Center is it might feel odd because we're historians, we're humanities. We kind of have it beaten into us by your families and all of that we're in careers that aren't going to be in demand and that we're not going to be, nobody's looking to hire historians or anything like that. And so a lot of people tend to overlook things like the resources like the Career Center out of a belief that the Career Center is geared more towards like STEM fields or something like that. But that's not the case. The Career Center, they do help with historians. They help with, I mean, every major at SNHU, the Career Center has specialists in those fields. And so there are specialists in the Career Center that deal with humanities, with liberal arts, with history, and they are knowledgeable about those fields, and they are very good and they're very kind of tenacious at helping to find opportunities for graduates from SNHU. Because if we can get SNHU graduates into full-time positions, that looks really good for SNHU. And so the career counselors at SNHU are very concerned with finding positions for you. They also are pretty good in the kind of bellwethers for the industry. They're pretty good at, like Professor Klein said, they're pretty good at giving reality checks. They're good at saying, okay, we've got these types of positions that our graduates tend to go into. In order to be successful at those, you should really be getting better at these particular skills. They're really good at identifying the types of things that students need to do to make themselves attractive to employers. Generally, our career services folks are looking to get you employed with um, private organizations, historical societies, archives, that kind of thing. Generally, they're not there to help you find an academic position somewhere. They'll help you however they can, but that's usually not their priority. But they are good at finding opportunities for you. So even though you are a history major and you have been told since the beginning of time that you aren't in demand, the career services folks are good at and they really want to help. So I second the use of the career services folks.
Yeah, they are a great resource. So, are you considering a teaching position? Well, it's one option for you. If you are, you will not use a resume. You will use what's called a curriculum vitae, or as we often call it, just a CV. And I highlight this because it's very, very important to have your documentation in line when you're applying for a job and making sure that you're submitting the right information, what the employer wants to see. And the other thing I would also note is the fact that the Career Center can assist with CVs as well. So if you need that CV and you're thinking about a teaching position, then definitely keep this in mind. Get in touch with the Career Center and get their guidance on how to write a CV because I will tell you from experience, it is very, very different from a resume, and all the roles regarding a resume, regarding the short 1 page, 2 page thing, you forget about all that with the CV because it's very length and it's going to continue to grow as your professional career grows. Um, so definitely keep that in mind, and you will need some initial help with that. And then once you get the template, you'll be in good shape for your future. You will also need a cover letter, and again, that's something the Career Center can assist with as well. But you'll also want to keep in mind the importance of professional references. And when we talk about the idea of professional references, we can circle back to the importance of talking to your instructors and getting to know your instructors and their background and how that can develop into that really professional um, friendship, I'll call it, as it relates to their ability to provide a reference for you as you move forward out into the discipline itself. And also keep in mind, what are you qualified to teach and why? Because this is something that you will have to spell out in your curriculum vitae. And these are questions that the Career Center will ask you because they're obviously going to provide the template for you, but and assist you with that writing process. But at the same time, it's going to be your information that they're working with. So it's ultimately going to be up to you to develop these responses and make sure you have all the information you need that you can present to them as well. You're considering an academic job search in teaching, couple familiar boards that you can take a look at: higheredjobs.com, teachingjobs.com, Chronicle Vitae, or even Indeed.com. But at the same time, you also want to consider non-traditional searches. And one that is becoming more and more popular is the babgroup.com, and it's out of California. And one of the nice things about the BAB group is they do non-traditional searches, and they have various services that you can purchase and things like that. But job leads, newsletters. They also do CV writing and reviews. But when they look for providing their job leads, they're not going to higheredjobs.com and sending those to you. They're looking at individual colleges that not going to necessarily be your UVAs or your Ohio State or Penn State, things like that. That hundreds and hundreds of people are watching their job boards. They're going to look at the smaller colleges that are kind of off the radar of some, and don't necessarily have the foot traffic. It allows you to get kind of that in, and that's what I kind of consider the non-traditional searches as it relates to looking for employment in an academic setting. The other thing I'd also note is the idea of looking local. And when you look local, it's very, very important to keep in mind your community colleges. I am an avid fan of community colleges. I had my first teaching experience at a community college, and it actually did not start from teaching. It started from working in the tutoring center. I was tutoring history and government students, and then also taking notes for students that had any type of learning disability. And it was just a really, really neat job to have, very rewarding job, very fulfilling job, working in the academic environment while also not necessarily, planning ahead, so to speak. That wasn't my career goal, but at the same time, it gave me an in into academia at the community college level, and that was a very rewarding experience. Dr. Denning, anything that you would add about the academic job search as it relates to those ideas or anything else on that concept?
Yeah, oftentimes the jobs that are being advertised on the national boards, like the higher ed jobs and the Chronicle Vitae and all of that, HNet is another one that advertises jobs. These are generally the top of the line university type jobs. And these are the ones that everybody aspires to. They're the ones where you're going to be the tenured professor, you're going to be teaching, 2 or 3 classes at a time. Generally, these are kind of the the glory type positions. Like Professor Klein said, these are it's where the Harvards are going to be advertising, Stanfords, and the land grant schools like Ohio State and Penn State. And so these are the national, the big jobs. These jobs are also going to receive hundreds of applications for every opening. Usually with like an American history tenure track professor job, they're going to receive 300 or 400 applications from PhDs and people that are very well qualified. Probably, out of that 300 applicants, probably a good 250 of them would probably be amazing at that position, but there's only one position, and so a lot of people are going to be disappointed. So those national jobs are very hard to get. And so that's one of the reasons that here we're focusing on these non-traditional searches like the BAB group and looking local and all of that, because these, like the BAB group, for example, they look at the the smaller schools, the schools that are hiring adjuncts for online, that kind of thing. They're not looking at the big national searches that are attracting hundreds of applicants. They're looking for the lower, not lower quality, but they're the lower stature schools. Maybe you want to say the lower ranked schools, but they're still good schools. And but they're not attracting the hundreds of applicants that the big nationals searches are finding. And so generally you tend to have better results going through the types of institutions that go through the BAB group and all of that, because generally they have fewer people applying to them. A lot of the times it's simply because people don't know about these jobs. Smaller schools don't have the funding to do a nationwide search for applicants. And so a lot of times they don't advertise on the national boards because they just don't have the funding, they don't have the logistics, they can't fly in the applicants to come in and do a nice tour of the school with interviews with the deans and all of that. So they're advertised locally, they're not necessarily advertising nationally. And when you're advertising to a smaller market, you're going to get fewer applications, and so your chances would increase in these non-traditional or these lower level institutions like community colleges, for example. And I agree completely with Professor Klein that community colleges are an excellent place to start, because these places are these students are generally non-traditional students, much like at SNHU. And so the student bodies will be similar to people that come out of SNHU. And it's a great place to get started. You learn how to teach with teaching styles that appeal to a lot of different people. You take into account different learning styles. You deal with students. You might have a 50-year-old retired Marine sitting next to an 18-year-old recent graduate from high school, and you have to figure out how to make the class work with all these different people. They emphasize teaching. It becomes a really great place for you to learn how to become a good teacher. And there's lots of opportunities for working part-time. They tend to be very flexible with part-time versus full-time. Full-time positions, again, are a little bit rarer, obviously, but there are opportunities there. And so uh, with my entire being, I second the recommendation for searching at community colleges, especially nearby, because then you don't have to uproot your life to go work somewhere else part-time.
You'll also make great connections there too, because your faculty group
Yes.
is going to be smaller amongst the full-time faculty. Obviously, you'll have dean or department chair. Those types of positions will be your full-time faculty, but you're going to come into a lot of contact with adjunct faculty members, like Dr. Dennigan mentioned, and that's going to allow you to make additional contacts. And what you want to keep in mind as you're making these contacts, whether you're just getting started or you know don't ever stop making contacts. Continue to
Yeah.
foster those and develop them. So you never know who you're going to come into meeting as it relates to your professional work, but community colleges definitely allows you to do that. And like Dr. Denning said, the student population is absolutely wonderful as it relates to the differing groups that are present and why they're there. So a lot of opportunity there as well. Public history job search, a little bit different, in terms of where you would look, but same idea. The American Association of State and Local History, for example, has a job board. You can look at your state historical associations, look local again, volunteer. You'll never know what opportunities will be presented if you don't throw yourself out there. On a personal level, I did work in public history for a while, and it was a position that came about as a volunteer position on the board of directors of the organization, and from there, I became the executive director. And it was, again, just a very small local historical organization. It was a museum, but it was something that really just developed because I was on the board of directors. I had a unique skill set that other board members didn't have based upon my academic training and some other work I had done. And it just allowed for a great opportunity. So, look local. That's something that we cannot emphasize enough. Looking local is something that will really, really benefit you as you move forward. Any comments on public history, Dr. Denning? Because it is very different than the academic realm.
It is, and I have less experience with public history than you do, but I also kind of stumbled into it kind of, randomly also. I was while I was wrapping up my PhD here in Ohio, I was looking through the WAN ads. I forget exactly what website it was on, but anyway, there was a site on there where they were asking for someone to come into a um, this organization which was doing universal living, where you have features of houses that can be used with people with various disabilities, universal access type stuff. And they had a model home where they had all kinds of features in there, like lower counters so that people that are in wheelchairs can reach the counters, and they had devices that could assist people with different disabilities and all that. And they wanted someone to come in and write a tour guide for docents that were going to be coming through and kind of leading tours through the thing. And so I volunteered. It was not paid, but basically they just wanted someone to take their old, they had an old Word document with a few random notes on it, and they wanted to make it into an organized, guide for the docents. And so I did that, and it was a pretty low key assignment. I toured the house a few times, and then I just took notes, and I just kind of wrote up an outline to give to the docents so that they would know in which room they should mention which specific things, and that was it. And it was a pretty low key job, but it's something really cool that's now on my resume because I was able to say that I was an editor for this Universal Design corporation that was leading it's a local leader in sustainability and environmental so it appeals, it kind of fits with a lot of different types of interests. And so but it was completely kind of accidental. I just stumbled across it and I volunteered for it, and now I've got a cool thing that's on my CV. I'm an editor for this universal design company, and so just things like that are what's going to make you stand out, because in those, even in the public history positions, every position is going to receive lots of applications. It may not be the hundred like some of those academic jobs will, but every position is going to receive a whole bunch of applications, because there are a lot of people that like history, and there are a lot of people that would like to work in history for the rest of their lives, and those people outnumber the jobs. So you're gonna face competition no matter where you go. So you need to figure out ways to make yourself stand apart from the others. And so if you can put stuff on your CV, volunteer experiences on your CV, that's what's going to make you stand out, and it's going to make you different from the other applicants. A lot of people that are applying to jobs, they got their degree, they went to school, but they didn't do anything else. Whereas if you went to school, but you also did this other stuff, that's what's going to make you stand apart and make you more appealing to the people that are hiring in all these local associations and institutions.
Never underestimate the importance of volunteering.
Exactly.
A lot of experience to be gained there. And when we talk about the job search for the public history realm, I'd also know, just kind of like we talked about in academia, if you're going to search for a job on, the American Association of State and Local History, for example, you're not the only one looking at that site, and those are also going to be your very, very top jobs. Because they'll feature them and things
Right.
like that. And if you're just graduating, that's not going to be your go-to job board. And that's
Right.
not said as a discouraging comment. That's just the reality. And that's where you can see what's out there, and then you can kind of tailor your search to what do I have to do to get there. But you look at the qualifications for jobs, even if you're not applying for them, because it tells you what the employers are looking for. And that's another, circle back to that career center that we talked about just a few moments ago. That's something the career center is also a great resource for. They're talking to recruiters, they're talking to people within the various disciplines, so they know what is being looked for, and they can kind of give you that guidance as well, just to help you plan for the future. The most important components, networking. We kind of talked about that as it relates to your instructors, and if you're in the community college, for example, meeting people, talking to people, establishing that network of contacts. Don't underestimate social media. I am a big believer in the power of social media to make contact, and I always reference to students that, the power of Twitter. Yes, there's a lot of non-academic information on Twitter, but what I talk to students about, what I like to reference these concepts for, is the fact that if you look, for example, public history, there's people manning Twitter accounts. There's actually a physical person on the other side of that account, and there's a lot of top-notch academics that also have Twitter accounts that you can follow and engage with, and you'd be very, very surprised at how easy it can be to engage in Twitter chats with some of the what I call the top thought leaders, within the overall discipline. LinkedIn is a great one. If you talk to the Career Center, I know for a fact, it's referenced in that video that I shared with you in the previous link, they will talk to you about the importance of LinkedIn and networking. HNets, Dr. Denning referenced them a few moments ago. There's a lot of networking that occur on the HNets, and you can actually get some publishing opportunities. Sometimes things will come to you that you're not even looking for, because you sign up on the HNets for what you're interested in, and then you get that type of information fed to you in your email. And also the history list is another option for you as well, as it relates to different things you can attend and kind of what's out there. And it's a state by state organizational listing that you can pull up. Professional memberships. American Historical Association is a top-notch organization to belong to. They offer some different services. Community College Humanities Association. I will be very honest with you. You can join hundreds of professional organizations. Don't do that, because you're not going to get the benefits of them. What you need to do is see what fits your research area, what is available to you locally, and what also pertains to what you're seeking to do. Take advantage of the memberships that are out there, but also, again, make sure they are what you need and what you're looking for. Um, don't just join to join, because you have to pay for memberships. So make sure you're going to get that bang for your buck, so to speak. Final request: let the history department at STU know of your accomplishments, because we want to celebrate with you. And it's very well possible that we might want to do a podcast with you so that you can share your experience with other students. Dr. Denning has done several podcasts before, and I know he's always looking for additional students, successful students to talk to and share their experiences so that they can inspire other students. Anything to add to that idea, Dr. Denning?
Well, I suppose this is as good a time as any is to, log roll a bit for the podcast. But we do have a podcast series called Filibustering History where we interview historians to find out what they do and how their career played out. How did they get to where they are? And one of the, excuse me, one of the constant things that we are finding when we interview folks is, like I mentioned before, kind of the random way that careers tend to work these days. People kind of go from one thing to another. There's just like with other fields in kind of the general economy, there's not people don't work the same place their entire lives anymore. And so there's a lot of kind of seeming randomness, but the some of the unifying factors that are present in a lot of those interviews, again, is people doing volunteer experiences, people doing new things that differentiate them from all of the other people that are applying for positions. And so it's meant to be a resource for students so that you can get a sense of what people did to get to where they are. We've talked to 20 some odd people at this point, and we've got a bunch more lined up. And we're going to be basically, you talk about how did you get to where you are? What degrees did you do? What did you study? What jobs did you take to get to where you are? And it can be very complicated for a lot of people. It's not complicated for some lucky folks, but for the vast majority of us, it's long and complicated. And so that's a resource for you to check out also. The I did want to mention with the professional memberships on the last slide, join now while you're a student so that you can get the grad student rate. It's cheaper than when you are out of school.
Mm-hmm.
Usually the membership price is like half of what it would be if you were just a professional or if you were just someone interested in joining it that wasn't a grad student. So by all means do that now. But again, focusing on specific organizations is a good idea. You don't waste money becoming a member of every professional organization because it's not going there's not going to be no payoff. But if you subscribe to a few organizations that focus on your areas of interest, your specific research focus of interest, your teaching interests, that kind of thing, then that one could pay off because you're going to be talking to a lot of people that are like you, that have similar interests. And so if you can build relationships with those folks, then that's networking right there. And so you can do that through professional organizations. So these are all good places to start. But again, the best thing you can do is talk to people that are currently working in the field, either as instructors or even if you go to your local historical society and just talk to the director of the local historical society to find out how did that person get that job. Because being the head of a local historical society is probably a pretty sweet gig. And so if you can find out how they did it, then that might give you a direction to take also. Find local archivists at the state archives or the county archives to find out what did they do to get that position. And then that might give you an idea for how to emulate that to get to that position if you're interested in that kind of thing. Talk to people. It can be hard to do. It can be nerve-wracking if you're an introvert, but that's how you're going to succeed. Is you talk to people, find out what they did to get to their current positions, and then you can either follow their path or follow a similar path, or they can also tell you things to not do because they can talk about the mistakes that they made. I could talk about the mistakes I made for an hour if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do that right
You
now.
will make mistakes. Period.
You will make
It's going to
mistakes.
happen.
Exactly. Everyone makes mistakes, and that's fine. That's kind of life. And so, your path as you envision it today probably will change over time, and it's good to talk to other people that have been through that. So take advantage of the networking opportunities because that's where a lot of these jobs come from. We like to think that academia is all about merit. It's all about kind of a neutral way of saying that, oh, this person is qualified and will do great things, when in reality, just like a lot of other professions, it's all about who you know. And if you get to know the department chair for a local community college, that person's going to hire you to be an adjunct. if that person doesn't know you, you're not going to even end up on the final list of potential hirees. It's all about it's who you know, which is difficult, but it's the reality. Just simply graduating with the degree is not enough. You need to build relationships. You need to build volunteer opportunities. You need to find a way to stand out from the crowd of people that all they did was get the degree. You don't want to be one of those folks. You need to build your experiences, build your CV, build your resume, so that people can see right off the bat why you would be a good fit for their institution.
Absolutely. And to make a plug here for both your podcast and the use of social media, you can actually follow Filibustering History on Twitter. The Twitter account is filibusterhist, HIST. So go ahead and check that out, and you'll receive a notification every time Dr. Denning uploads a new podcast.
Exactly. You'll hear from me all the time. And by
You
all means,
will.
start listening to episodes and pad those numbers a bit too.
Mm-hmm. Who was your very first interview, Dr.
Oh, it was this guy named Chris Klein. You might have heard of him.
Denning? We've heard things. Anyhow, I had to throw that in there. But no, in all seriousness, the podcasts are great, and definitely take advantage of them because you will learn something. And again, like we talked about at the beginning, when you talk about backgrounds, everybody has a unique background, and the more you know about the differing career paths people take, the more it will open up to you the realization of some of the differing things that are out there that you never even thought about. So, it's all just part of learning and just continuing to be active in that process as it relates to how can it best benefit you as you move forward in your own career path that you are ultimately making for yourself. With that said, thank you. We do wish you luck, and if you have any questions or need anything at all, we are here to help and would be more than happy to hear from you. Have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.